Hello, and welcome to our podcast for college Catholics, where we discuss faith and spirituality from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Patrick. On July 1968, Pope St. Paul VI published an encyclical called Humanae Vitae in Latin. Its intention was to address the current difficulties faced by families in the modern world, where the cultural views on life and children in the family were shifting. And they were shifting toward a perception of the family as having less children in order to adapt to modern work environments and societal pressures. Some years before, the contraceptive pill had been introduced and made available to the public in the U.S. The publication of the encyclical had been announced several months ahead, and different journalists and theologians were starting to spread the rumor that the Pope would change the traditionally held views of the Catholic Church on contraception and maybe allow the use of the contraceptive pill. This was a way to put pressure on the Holy Father to change the Catholic teaching, the Catholic moral teaching. However, in the encyclical, Pope Paul VI clearly taught that the act of contraception continues to be a gravely sinful act and therefore should not be practiced. However, he explained how under serious circumstances, husband and wife could distance the births of children by using the natural rhythms of the woman's fertility cycles. Many people, even so-called Catholic theologians, opposed this magisterial teaching of the Holy Father. But apart from rejecting his particular teaching on contraception, they started arguing that the magisterium had no authority to meddle in personal moral choices that were the responsibility of husband and wife. And here we come to the topic of this episode. So the question was the following: does the Church in her magisterium have the authority to declare or determine issues that involve moral choices that the individuals should make? In other words, should the Church only teach truths that pertain to the doctrinal faith? That is, questions like whether God is one and three persons, or whether Jesus is substantially present in the Eucharist, or whether the Virgin Mary was assumed body and soul into heaven. Or should the Church also teach what are the right choices to make in certain circumstances, and what other choices are sometimes or always wrong, in such a way that she would indicate the moral path for us to reach heaven? The answer is clearly that the Church has the right and the duty not only to teach in matters of doctrinal faith, but also has the right and the duty to teach on matters of moral choices. And these choices refer not only to the moral law of the gospel, but also to natural law. That is, the Catholic Church has the God-given authority to teach not only about the moral laws present in the teachings of Christ in the gospel, but she also has the authority to give the right interpretation to the natural moral law and therefore teach about marriage, the family, the begetting of children, contraception, abortion, and what we call natural family planning. So in the words quoted from the Encyclical Humanae Vitae, he says, "No member of the faithful could possibly deny that the Church is competent in her magisterium to interpret the natural moral law. It is in fact indisputable, as our predecessors have many times declared, that Jesus Christ, when he communicated his divine power to Peter and the other apostles, and sent them to teach all nations his commandments, constituted them as the authentic guardians and interpreters of the whole moral law. Not only, that is, the law of the gospel, but also the natural law. For the natural law, too, declares the will of God, and its faithful observance is necessary for men's eternal salvation." Up to there, Pope Paul VI. So the key thing here is that Jesus Christ established the Catholic Church as pillar and bulwark of the truth, as we read in the first letter to St. Timothy, in order to teach the truth revealed by Christ to the world through the apostles. And this revealed truth is, in the first place, doctrinal, of course. That is, it pertains to truths referring to the faith about this world and about heaven. But in second place, the revealed truth is also moral, that is, moral teachings. That is, it pertains to the choices we have to make or avoid in order to get to heaven. So you should ask yourself, what would happen if the church were to stop teaching the revealed truth about morality? What would happen if the Catholic Church were to stop giving an authoritative interpretation of the different situations that appear throughout history under the light of the law of the gospel and the natural law? What would happen if the church were to stop teaching what the natural law prescribes for society and for each individual in order to do what is right before God? If the church were to stop preaching or teaching the moral truth, we would be completely lost, or what is worse, we would be guided by other teachers, by human pseudo-moral teachers who would simply impose their opinions or their own agendas according to their preferences and their interests. It wouldn't be a guidance given by God. This is why the magisterium of the church has the right and the duty to teach the revealed truth in what refers to doctrine and in what refers to moral teachings, which extends again to the interpretation of the natural law. Because the observance of the natural law is also necessary for our salvation. And I quote now the Catechism, which states the following in number 2032. The Church is the pillar and bulwark of truth. It has received this solemn command of Christ from the apostles to announce the saving truth. To the Church belongs the right, always and everywhere, to announce moral principles, including those pertaining to the social order, and to make judgments on any human affairs to the extent that they are required by the fundamental rights of the human person or the salvation of souls. Unquote. Now, sometimes some theologians might argue that some of those moral decisions must be made following one's moral conscience. In a word, what some people might think is that for them, the right thing to do might be in opposition to what the church teaches, and therefore, what they think is right is not what the church thinks is right. In the case of the act of contraception that we presented at the beginning, for example, these theologians would argue that sometimes the conscience of the husband and the wife might indicate that it is okay for them to use contraception to avoid a new birth. So to this, the church answers, saying that while each one is supposed to follow their conscience when making difficult choices, that conscience has to be always well formed, according to the principles of the Catholic moral teaching. And therefore, as the Catechism states in number 2039, one's personal conscience and reason should not be set in opposition to the moral law or the magisterium of the church. So, our personal conscience is not the final authority. Our personal conscience has to be illuminated and guided by the moral teachings of the church. In this sense, the church also has the right to establish further laws to help in the practice of the commandments and the teachings of the gospel. And this is what she does when she issues certain precepts that oblige us to live in a certain way and put certain things into practice. These are what we call the precepts of the church, the 5 precepts of the church, that are like an addition to the commandments, and we're all obliged to fulfill them. But we will leave that for our next episode, so make sure you tune in to our upcoming episode. So thank you for spending this time with me today. Please share this episode with your friends, and if you can, please leave a review on Spotify or on Apple's podcasts. Hope to see you next time. May God bless your day.